Welcome back to the Solid Verbal Boys and Girls. My name is Ty Hildebrandt. That fine gentleman over there, as always, you know him well. His name is Dan Rubenstein, sir. Welcome back to the podcast where today we're taking a little bit of a stroll down memory lane, are we not?
We are. I have my good walking shoes on because I'm old now, and so I need that sort of support. Yes, we're going for a stroll down memory lane, and we're doing it in the best way because we get to be very specific about the memories and players that provided us with those memories that we treasure the most, probably from the last couple years, because we're looking at players who were recording this before the NFL draft that are on the precipice of being drafted. Did I use that word correctly,
You did.
Ty?
Perfect.
Yes. I don't always do, but when I do, I'm pretty happy about it. And just the guys we're going to miss, the big names, the medium-sized names that we're going to miss, and why, perhaps who's replacing them at various schools. And I enjoy it. I enjoy removing a lot of the context from the sport because I don't get to do it often. Like, it doesn't matter who Michigan played here or there. It doesn't matter who Arkansas played here or there. Let's just appreciate Rocket Sanders. Let's appreciate Zach Zinter or whoever. That was a pull, right? That wasn't bad.
Good pull.
Thank you. And say, it doesn't matter what they did against Ohio State. It doesn't matter what they did against this specific game. We really liked watching them, and maybe we'll mention a memory from a specific game. But I think it's okay to bear our emotions and our souls and saying, like, all these guys that had a huge hand in providing us with meaningful Saturdays. And it's not just about the uniforms. It's not just about the coaches. Let's talk about some guys we enjoyed.
To be a fan of this damn sport means that you are, in some way, shape, or form, also a fan of nostalgia.
Sure.
You're also a fan of being irrationally emotional with respect to players and teams and rivals and so on and so forth. And yeah, to your point, this is one of those episodes where we can remove a lot of that context.
Sure.
And we can just react, be emotional, and speak to what makes us fans. So we're going to go through those lists. You've got a list. I've got a list. We solicited a list from folks out on social media as well. This is essentially the episode where we talk about the dudes that we're going to miss, either going off into the NFL draft, maybe going pro in something other than sports.
Sure.
But as we get to draft season, this time of year, every year, it does offer us a moment of reflection, and we're gonna take that and run with it here on the episode.
And did we license Vitamin C's Friends Forever?
We tried.
That something that we didn't. It fell through. Damn it!
It fell through.
Such a good weird song.
we did try to record this episode twice previously, and my computer crashed on both occasions. Hopefully, we get it right this time. It has not crashed yet. Stay tuned. Hopefully.
God, you're fifth decade of life? You're not able to wrangle computer? Like, we'll get you a call with like the Geek Squad or something, Ty. We'll get to the bottom of this.
Hopefully, no more technical issues here on the podcast.
Fine.
If you are listening, if you are just finding us now, the most important thing you can do to make sure you get all of our episodes, but of course, support the podcast that Dan and I do twice a week throughout the off season. Hit follow or subscribe wherever it is you're consuming this show. We'd appreciate it. Leave us a wonderful review if you're ever so inclined. And if you really like the show, verballers.com. It's where you go for the ad-free episodes and the bonus perks. Get this episode, all the episodes a little bit early, so on and so forth. Before we dive into the topic du jour, though.
Yeah.
We do have a bit of breaking news.
Ooh, off-season form or in-season form. Boop, 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 boop.
Reggie Bush getting his Heisman back, yo.
Yes, he is. Long overdue. Long overdue for Reggie Bush and the Heisman being returned to him, the Heisman Trust. It's what a full formal reinstatement, I think, was the phrasing I saw from ESPN's Pete Thamel of Reggie Bush getting his Heisman back after, I believe, both he and USC were punished unfairly, given the evidence presented and how much Reggie Bush did or didn't know about the arrangement with the house in San Diego. I thought it was all ridiculous, especially given the current environment in the sport, which I think was part of the given reason, like the changing environment of college football with NIL and money being exchanged for, can you believe it, somebody's labor.
Yeah.
that Reggie Bush would get his Heisman back. So I think it's long overdue. And I think, once again, USC was punished unfairly. I think he was punished unfairly. And glad to see it ending like this, and can't wait to see. Even though, like, the Heisman isn't my biggest priority within the sport, it'll be very cool to see, hopefully, Reggie up on the New York stage this year.
I mean, if we want to talk about doing a show in which nostalgia is a primary component, Reggie Bush in 2005 has such an outsized impact on my fandom as a fan of this sport.
Agree.
Maybe more so than anyone outside of Rocket Ishmael back in the Notre Dame day, Chris Zorich back in the Notre Dame days. In my early formative years, Reggie Bush winning that Heisman, seeing what he did out there on the college football field was incredible. And you're right, like, they're going to fully reinstate him. It's probably long overdue. The Heisman Trust has called it, quote, an enormous changes in the college football landscape, which of course is accurate. Again, this is reporting from Pete Thamel. We posted this out on social media. We got an interesting range of responses. Most people came down on the side of, thank God, give him the damn trophy back. Who cares? Other folks came down on the side of, well,
what do the losers say, Ty?
Well, listen.
What are the haters and losers?
Everybody's allowed to have their own opinion on this. I'm not saying I agree with it, but there were a subset of folks who looked at this and said, well, there were rules in place.
You might not agree with the rules, but there are rules. Yeah.
Broke the rules at the time, therefore he shouldn't be given his trophy back.
You forgot to assign us homework.
I'm not saying I vouch for that perspective.
We're due for a pop quiz.
College football has changed, whether this is a retroactive thing or not. It's at the time.
Yeah.
In the immediate shadow of what the NCAA did to USC, I think you and I were pretty clear. We felt like, yeah, it's a bit harsh. And as time has worn on, those infractions, those penalties that were levied against USC have not aged well. They've not aged well at all. And so that's why I think this is long overdue. Not just because I loved watching Reggie Bush out there on the field. Obviously, he was a deserving winner of the Heisman Trophy. But college football has changed. It's changed in a really big way. And I think this is a nice signal from the Heisman Trust to give him the trophy back.
Well, I would, also point to the fact that, like, maybe Texas fans didn't feel like Reggie Bush ever should have had the Heisman with Vince Young's season.
True.
But
true.
We saw Reggie Bush play football. We saw him play at an absolute Heisman level, if not something beyond. And that Heisman should be, at Heritage Hall or whatever at USC, should be in his living room. And it helps to make everything right in the college football world, a world that will never be right. And that's the appeal. But yeah, we don't need to belabor the point with Reggie Bush. Anybody who watched Reggie Bush appreciates Reggie Bush. And he was the most gravitational modern player. I don't remember a player, maybe this is just my memory going, but I don't remember a player who got the live arrow treatment pre-snap. Holy hell, where's Reggie Bush right now? He's in the slot. He's in the backfield. Hey, everybody watching, this is the player that might do something crazy in about 3 seconds. Getting the arrow, Reggie Bush, number 5. And so, yeah, glad we are able to come full circle.
Move Pat. The two things I think of when I think of Reggie Bush.
Yeah.
And specifically with this whole trophy business, even though I know Michigan fans slung a few arrows at me when I talked about vacating wins with the whole Connor Stallions thing going on, I am not a fan of that as any kind of punishment. I think it's stupid. We see what we see. I don't know what they're going to do to Michigan. I don't really care. We saw that Michigan won the national championship. Michigan should retain that. We saw what Reggie Bush did on the field. He was deserving of winning a Heisman Trophy. I don't think they ever should have taken it away. Rules aside. That's the first thing. The second thing is, especially this time of year, as this podcast drops on the day of the first round of the NFL draft, do you remember the drama surrounding that draft with Reggie Bush?
Was it Mario Williams who won? Yeah.
Do you remember the drama and the dilemma over whether or not Reggie Bush should go 1, if it should be somebody else? I remember distinctly where I was when I heard that Reggie Bush was not going to be the number 1 overall pick.
Yeah.
And I had a visceral negative reaction to it. Now, I'm not an NFL GM. And Mario Williams went on to a pretty productive NFL career, much more so than Reggie Bush.
Who also had a productive NFL,
also
he
had
had
a productive
good
NFL career.
Saints, Dolphins, yeah.
For sure. But that to me is also, I think, woven into the fabric of my Reggie Bush memory, because leading up to the draft, that dilemma of do we, don't we take him one was, I think, a great representation of what the draft is and what it should be and why people might be interested in it at all. Because that weird kind of will they, won't they that we deal with every year, it doesn't matter who it is, that was an interesting follow in the moment.
Yeah, I like the overlap here, and we're going to get into the players from the last couple of years or the last year right now. But there's something that changes in you when you go from saying, like, of course you take Reggie Bush #1 overall, to like, well, the actual pragmatic thing would be to build out your defensive line or to like protect this quarterback's blind side.
I hate it, man.
And
I hate it.
It's investing in a Roth IRA versus investing in a Ferrari, right? You're just like, what's so fun about a Roth IRA? I could zoom around a canyon in this investment. And so, yeah, something changes and you grow up. And so, yeah, I am comparing Mario Williams to a Roth IRA, but like, that's not cool. It's the right thing to do, but it's not cool. You know what's really cool? Reggie Bush in your backfield.
Man,
and
he was so cool. Was it with the 619 on the eye black? Come on.
I don't remember being outraged, but I remember being confused. Like, just you can get a defensive lineman anywhere. You can't get Reggie Bush anywhere. And so now I'm old and boring, and I say, of course, you just load up on defensive linemen and find value at running back somewhere else in the draft. I'm not a GM. I just want to see stars play like stars, whatever position they play. And if you're a transformative offensive skill player, you're going to seduce me. I don't know what to tell you.
That's just the way it is. That's the way it is. And I think certainly looking back, knowing what Reggie Bush did for me as a fan, I rooted for a rival team. He certainly was not I saw Reggie Bush. I saw the Bush push in person.
I saw Reggie Bush reverse field against Oregon in person and like do the little like, ooh, he's going to hit the corner of the end zone and just like throws his hips to the outside. Like I was there for that. It wasn't the Bush push, but like Reggie Bush terrorized both of our teams.
He terrorized our teams and still fond memories of the guy. I'm glad he's got the trophy back. I don't care about the rules. Rules be damned. Let us know your thoughts. solidverbal@gmail.com or anywhere across social media. Should we get into the topic du jour?
Let's. You ready?
I am.
You ready, Ty?
I'm ready.
Okay, so you mentioned nostalgia, and I will say it seems like just yesterday that these guys were going away to college, but blink and you miss them. These are the guys not just making big plays, but doing all the small things and not playing with reckless abandon. And sure, Ty, the draft process can feel like one long first date for these guys, with GMs deciding whether or not they're feeling this.
How long did it take you to go full Blink 182 with this? Just wondering.
And not to get too emo, Ty.
Just wondering.
But we're here on our podcast, yodeling our online songs. So on today's show, we're turning our attention to the guys being drafted just to say, damn it, I miss you.
Wow.
Where are you?
I regret everything and nothing all at the
One
same
more time.
time.
Play that again.
Where are you?
Did you just pull that or have you had that?
I don't even remember, Ty.
I think you've had that for a while, but it's been a minute.
I just pulled it again this morning, that clip of Tom DeLonge from the like vocals only track of I Miss You. But yeah, little Blink 182 for no reason, late April 2024.
I love it.
Back together.
I love it. All right. Well, we have much to discuss here.
Can I start?
We each have lists.
Yeah, sorry. Continue.
We each have lists of guys that we are going to miss, frankly, for one reason or another, which we can get into. We encouraged the Verballerhood out on Twitter earlier today to send in some names as well and why they're going to miss specific players. We would encourage you to do the same. Again, solidverbal@gmail.com. You can hit us up on social media. For what it's worth, we've been making some videos out on the Instagram and the TikTok accounts, really posting them all over the place. To this effect, guys that we're going to miss and why we're going to miss them, some of their interesting backstories and whatnot. And we've compiled a longer list here, as we can do in a longer on-demand audio format, that we're going to talk through here today. So you've got a list. I've got a list.
Yeah.
You want to start? Go for it.
So I stayed on theme, and I looked up a measurable to see if I could transition easily from that ridiculous preamble.
Sure.
I've got a player here who is the only player in like the top few rounds listed at exactly 182 pounds for Blink-182.
Okay.
And he happened to be a player I'm going to miss considerably. And
Okay.
that's Mike Sainristil, Michigan.
182 pounds exactly.
5'9", 182 is what he came in at. Or 5'9" and change, perhaps. I'm going to miss that. So it's like a truly college story, Mike Sainristil, okay? So he starts out at Michigan playing receiver, and he's like a decent third receiver. He pops a little bit. I think his first like introduction to the college game was he had like 70 yards receiving when Michigan absolutely demolished Notre Dame 2019, I want to say, in the rain.
Okay.
And so he's a receiver for 3 years. The secondary gets thin. Dax Hill leaves the nickel to go to the NFL. Mike Sainristil steps in, is electric, has the huge pass breakup against Ohio State, has a big speech on the sideline. If you remember, Bruce Feldman overheard it and wrote about it for The Athletic, where it was basically Mike Sainristil yelling at the defense, saying, like, look at their heads. They're holding their heads down low. Essentially, they're ready to be stomped. And this is where we, finish the job. And he made play after play, culminating in the back half of the season this year. He basically iced the Maryland game himself with 2 second-half picks when the offense was doing nothing with an injured J.J. McCarthy. And then he has an 82-yard interception return to like the 6-yard line against Washington for the dagger in that game. So you can say, yes, Michigan was built around its, great offensive NFL caliber lines and J.J. McCarthy developing and, the depth on both sides of the ball and Blake Corum coming back and Donovan Edwards with his long runs. To me, the defining element is the versatility and playmaking, like the heartbeat of this team. He led the team in snaps this year. Mike Sainristil led the defense in snaps. Like, that's the heartbeat of Michigan. 5'9", 180. Not big, not the most physical dude in the whole world. He just went out and made plays for a national championship winning team and finishes his career at Michigan as like he's an icon. He's a legend.
Yeah.
And so I miss dudes like that.
And also came to Michigan not as like the most heralded recruit.
No.
Either. Was
from Massachusetts.
Consensus,
Don Brown connection. Yeah.
Consensus 3-star. Yeah. I believe the top player in the state of Massachusetts out of high school. But
yeah. Born in Haiti. Yeah.
But relatively low on the totem pole with respect to other corners in that class.
Came in as a receiver. Yeah.
So it was definitely a cool story for Mike Sainristil to move up the depth charts in the manner that he did and to become, as he said, an icon at Michigan.
Yeah.
Also one of those guys, and I think this is going to be true about all the names that we throw out here as part of this episode, one of those guys whose name you just always hear on the broadcast.
Yes.
One of those, like that guy who you just can't get away from.
Mm-hmm.
I think you're going to mention another guy for Iowa here shortly who also falls into that category. But Sainristil, for sure, you could not watch a Michigan game without hearing his name a gazillion times.
No. And he stepped in. Will Johnson gets hurt against Ohio State, steps in and takes Marvin Harrison Jr. in that game, starts playing, I think, the boundary. Like, just, I don't know, man. There are guys like that who are not prototypical size, not prototypical everything. And that's college football, right? That, like, the NFL is trying to fit everybody into a very neat package. Like, this is what a safety should be. This is what a left guard should be. And Mike Sainristil, he's not small.
No.
But certainly doesn't come in as like a 6'1", 205 corner. And it's just like he's like a pre-All-American. Not his story at all. And so just very cool to see, Mike Sainristil go out on top, given all of the fluctuations with Michigan.
No, I agree. Can I give you a guy who
Please.
maybe kind of sort of falls into that same category?
Yeah.
Let's talk about Jordan Travis.
Oh, definitely.
Give me Tom. Can I hear Tom again?
Where are
Thank
you?
you, Dan.
Yeah, of course.
So, as I said, we put a call out on Twitter asking folks to chime in, and we got one from Kevin who wrote in and said basically that Jordan Travis deserved to go out better than he did with obviously the injury, which was pretty traumatic. It submarines Florida State's playoff chances. By now, you certainly all know the story behind Jordan Travis, but let me share a personal anecdote on Jordan Travis and why he is on this list for me. If you have listened to this show for any amount of time, surely you know that Dan and I tend to be wrong from time to time. Happens to the
yourself.
best of us, right?
Yeah.
Whenever you are doing this many episodes of this damn podcast over however many years, yeah, you're going to encounter situations where you're wrong often. I was wrong about Jordan Travis.
Yeah, you were a doubter pretty late.
I was. I had it in my head early on, maybe 2 years ago, that he wasn't very good. And I was on this podcast week in and week out talking about how Jordan Travis is not that good. They need a new quarterback. To be sure, he got better.
Mm-hmm.
He wasn't a finished product until maybe the end of last season, most of this season. But I don't know if it was ever truly a situation where he wasn't, quote, good. This was before I examined any of his stats, before I had the opportunity to watch a lot of what he was doing on any given Saturday. And at the time, you'll remember this, Travis May, who wrote for our site, good dude, super bright, knows prospects, is doing great work on that front now. He, at the time, had a conversation with me through our company Slack and was like, dude, company
yeah.
Slack. I'm telling a
you're
story
good.
here.
You're good.
At the time, he's like, dude, I don't know. You might want to give him another look.
Yeah.
You might not want to write him off so quickly because, in my opinion, he's pretty damn good. He's coming into his own. And if only because I expected our Travis, not Jordan Travis, so much, I did do that. And almost instantly, I did a 180. Did a 180 on this kid.
Mm-hmm.
You want to talk about the Johnny Cash quote of kicking and gouging in the mud and the blood and the beer. That is Jordan Travis. That is his college story at Florida State, because they didn't want him to be the starting quarterback. They were constantly looking for other options. When Mike Norvell came in there, Jordan Travis was one of those guys who was in on the ground floor, helping to build culture. You'll recall the early days of Mike Norvell through the pandemic. It got rocky there for a while. Jordan Travis was in it, and he was helping build this thing that Florida State has now become. And so his plight as a college athlete, never mind what happens in the NFL, never mind what ended up happening with Florida State last season, but his plight through college of coming in, not necessarily being the top rung of the depth chart, helping work with a new coach to build a culture to move the whole program forward.
Right.
That, no matter what happens to Jordan Travis moving forward, that is a success story in college football, the likes of which many cannot tell. And so I salute him. By the time he ended up walking out there as a senior, I was excited about watching Jordan Travis, seeing what he could do. A lot of the offense, as we now know, ran through Jordan Travis and what he was able to provide. And I hope that whatever comes next for him, it's equally as exciting. But I'm going to miss seeing him out there, if only because I did like a full 180 on how I felt about Jordan Travis as a college football player.
So a couple things about Jordan Travis, both specific to him and specific to Florida State. So if you remember, Jordan Travis didn't commit to Florida State. He was Louisville.
That's right.
And he was like this mysterious hope because Florida State and quarterback was kind of a nightmare. Early Jimbo, early Norvell, late Jimbo, excuse me. And he was like this weird, like, if we can get him to transfer, if the academics or whatever work out, like, this might be an answer. And I remember, like, nobody's seen him play quarterback. Why is he immediately seen as the answer? And I guess it goes back to, like, okay, you think about where, like, Florida State's offensive line was late Jimbo, right? The disastrous aspect of Florida State's offense because of that line. And then you look at the post-Jameis quarterback run at Florida State. So it's Everett Golson for a year, right? You're going to DeAndre Francois, who shows flashes but is dealing with like significant injuries. And then it's like this mix of Jordan Travis, James Blackman. You get an Alex Hornibrook thrown in there. You get a Mackenzie Milton thrown in there, who was kind of like recruited to take Jordan Travis's place, if memory serves. And Jordan Travis deals with the injury issues of his own, obviously most notably the one that ended his Florida State career at the end of, was it North Alabama? At the end of 2023. But what Jordan Travis offered was a lot of stability at a quarterback position that Florida State really hadn't seen. There were stretches of DeAndre Francois, I suppose, but not on the level of like Jordan Travis's ceiling. And so what that represents with Florida State, I think, is enormous, culminating in, an excellent 2023.
Who we got next? On your list?
I'm going my next guy that I'm going to miss. Here, I'm going to go to the top. I'm going to go to Caleb Williams. And
really?
I'm going to go to Caleb Williams because we just don't see Caleb Williams all the time in college football and going into the draft. And the Caleb Williams story is kind of a weird one. He's from DC. He and his dad were just locked in on Lincoln Riley. They're like, I'm going to play for Lincoln Riley. And it was, I want to say, Brock Vandegrift, who was committed to Oklahoma initially. And so Oklahoma stopped recruiting Caleb Williams. And he was just like, I don't care. I'll walk on if they're not going to offer me a scholarship. He's like, I'm such a believer in my ability and in Lincoln Riley's ceiling, given obviously the quarterbacks who came through there, the Heisman guys, the receivers developed, that I'm just going to go to Oklahoma. Brock Vandegrift ends up going to Georgia. Caleb Williams ends up going to Oklahoma, stepping in for Spencer Rattler as a true freshman, winning the Texas game in a big comeback situation.
Yep.
Has some down moments. I want to say Baylor and Iowa State were probably not his best Saturdays, but shows incredible flash. Sticks around for the bowl game after Lincoln Riley leaves. Helps to demolish Oregon in the weird Alamo Bowl that was coached by Bob Stoops.
Yep. And
who was the interim for Oregon after Mario Cristobal left? It might have been the receivers coach. It was somebody, obviously. And plays well in that game, decides to transfer to USC. Obviously, Oklahoma fans are not fans of Caleb Williams anymore, certainly not of Lincoln Riley's. Goes to USC, puts up cartoonish numbers, makes incredible plays, is now sort of derided by half of like the industrial draft complex. The draft industrial complex, that's probably the better order there. Because he painted his nails or he was emotional after a loss, and like it's just all garbage. Doesn't matter. You can doubt Caleb Williams without pointing out that he's like super competitive and a little bit weird. Like I would love to be considered super competitive and a little bit weird.
Yeah.
And just made incredible plays and heightened the entertainment. Like he was an incredible TV show. Like say what you will about whatever deficiencies you perceive him to have. Like Caleb Williams was a starring actor on an entertaining TV show, partially because he had to score 50 points a game almost solo because of the USC defense. But like, I don't know, you can't take a player like Caleb Williams for granted. You just can't.
Well,
and so I'm gonna miss the pop and the juice there, Ty. That's all.
I think I agree with you. And go back, listen to our episode that we did with Nate Tice when I asked him the question about, do we know Caleb Williams is definitely going to be better than Justin Fields? Justin Fields played some hero ball. That's been the knock on Caleb Williams. Is this one of those things where they're essentially drafting like kind of the same guy? And
heroes can be entertaining.
Well, heroes are definitely entertaining. But yeah. Nate, I think, did a really good job explaining why it's not exactly apples to apples and what Caleb Williams was up against after transferring to USC with some of the deficiencies on that roster. I don't know if you saw the clip that's been making the rounds out on social media right now where Caleb Williams went on the Pivot podcast.
Is that Ryan Clark?
Ryan Clark. And got a question to the degree of, give us a time that you were, really upset or I forget the exact setup, but in essence, Caleb Williams talked in detail about how he was essentially crushed when he did not win the job over Spencer Rattler.
Yeah.
When he first came to Oklahoma.
Which nobody truly assumed he would.
Nobody assumed he would, but
yeah,
he felt in spring ball that he had beaten out Spencer Rattler. Now, at the time, the deal with Spencer Rattler.
Probably wasn't wrong. Yeah.
Yeah, probably wasn't wrong. But Spencer Rattler he came into college, and for a good chunk of his time in college, still now is probably going to be drafted by the NFL. But it was seen as a situation where Spencer Rattler is going to be drafted very highly into the league. He needs to get the start. We need to see what he can do. We know how things shook out there. We know that Caleb Williams eventually supplanted him, and, the rest is sort of history. But Caleb Williams has always had this seemingly ridiculous belief in his own abilities.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess if I am drafting a quarterback, that's the kind of guy that I want on my team. Somebody who is very confident, somebody who wants the ball in his hands in a key situation. I don't mind the fact that he got emotional in losses or anything like that.
Good by me.
I want a guy who cares. I think that's at least, not that he's doing it on purpose, but that's one way we know that he cares and isn't exactly out there dogging it, despite the fact that he maybe didn't have the supporting cast that he should have at a school like a USC.
Watch the end of, I think it was this year's Arizona game that goes to overtime, where he goes into a mode where he essentially just says, fine, I'll do it myself, right? Where he's running in touchdowns and 2-point conversions, and he's single-handedly willing USC against what was probably a better Arizona team who made some mistakes and going away from what was working in that game, and just decided to win the game himself. Now, Arizona was not a great team this year. They're a good team. But his ability to shoulder that kind of load is not something we see every year, every draft class, every generation. Like, there are guys that come around, whether it's Lamar Jackson, whether it's Marcus Mariota, whether it's Johnny Manziel, who have like this different ability to have that confidence that like there's nobody on the field that's truly going to stop me. Maybe there's 4 guys on the field who will stop me, but there's no one safety who's going to meet me midfield who's going to get the best of me. I think it's fine to appreciate. It's fun to appreciate.
It's fun to appreciate. And just remember this, if you're going to watch the draft, you're going to hear 300 some odd names, all of which are really good athletes. That's the only reason they're going to be drafted at all.
Yeah.
Not everybody's interesting. There is a difference. And you can't always quantify why that is. Certainly Caleb Williams is cream of the crop. He's going to be the first overall pick. But Caleb Williams has been nothing if not interesting in this TV show that we call college football over the last 3 years. And for that reason, I will miss him too.
And my family and friends are going to root for him here in the greater Chicago area.
You get to see him up close and personal. Let me give a shout out to my guy, Will Shipley, Dan.
Oh, okay.
Will Shipley. One of my biggest regrets over the last couple years is that we never did a Will Shipley themed Twos Cruise.
Yeah,
it was right there for us. In the name, it says ship.
Mm-hmm. No, thanks for the explanation.
Never took that opportunity. I have quietly been lieutenant commander on the USS Will Shipley.
Yeah.
I celebrate the guy's entire catalog. I was convinced from the moment he was a recruit, from the moment he came into my consciousness, that he was going to be the next Christian McCaffrey.
Yeah.
Didn't really turn into the next Christian McCaffrey. But I think still has a ton of upside as a pro. Again, Ty Hildenbrandt's not an NFL GM.
Even like the next Travis Etienne, which I don't think he was.
No.
But yeah.
No. But I think he came into Clemson at a really interesting time. I'm going to stop short of saying that Clemson's on any kind of downswing, but Clemson went on a run there where they were sort of unstoppable. And he happened upon the Clemson roster after that.
Yeah.
Still a very good team. Just a different version of Clemson.
Different kind of line, different kind of quarterback, different kind of offense. Yeah.
And I think because of that, he did not, more to the point of supporting casts, I don't know if he quite had what some of his predecessors had around him. This is not to say Will Shipley would have been better in that circumstance. We obviously can't play that game. We don't know.
Oh, I'll play the game. The players around him were not as good as the players that came before, and he would have been better playing behind the mid-teens lines next to Deshaun Watson. Yes.
For all of those reasons, I still have a ton of hope for what Will Shipley can do at the next level, and I'm going to be rooting like hell for him because I feel like he was asked to carry a load that was not fair. It was an offense that felt disorganized and, I guess didn't have the supporting cast around him that some of his predecessors did. And I want to see what he can do if put in a good situation in the NFL because I think he's a well-rounded back. He's a bigger guy. He can obviously run. He blazed at the combine. We know he can catch passes out of the backfield. He does a lot well. And I just want to see if we can find a situation for him where somebody fully unlocks his potential. Because I'm waiting. I've been waiting for the last couple of years. So I'm eagerly gonna watch him in the NFL. He's one of these guys where I'm gonna draft him on every fantasy team. And it's gonna be without rhyme or reason. It might be a terrible fit, but I know college players, and I want college players that I like on my teams. And so Will Shipley is going to be one of those guys for me.
He's sort of like when people discuss NBA players playing in the wrong era, like what would Allen Iverson do in the modern era? Like the 3-and-D guys who weren't appreciated in the 90s or something. That Will Shipley, his game, obviously, he would have been successful for any team he played with. He's a very talented running back. But I'm going to stick with that theme, and I'm going to say I'm going to miss Braylon Allen, who just felt like he hit Wisconsin 5 years too late, right? That, like, he hit Wisconsin as the team is on a downturn with Paul Chryst and shows incredible flash as a freshman. I mean, it looks like he's 30
as like a 17-year-old freshman, right?
Right. He enrolled early. He has cartoon. I believe he enrolled early. I may be wrong, but he puts up like cartoonish, like he's squatting 3,500 pounds, like, something like that. And it just looks like he's the next Wisconsin dude, right? He's the next, take your pick. And it's following Melvin Gordon, who was sensational, obviously, for the Badgers, and comes in. I believe he's local to Wisconsin. And so it's already a good story there. And whether it's injuries, whether it's just inconsistencies, whether it's the offensive line taking a step back, whether it's a whole new system with Luke Fickell and Phil Longo that you go in optimistically saying like, oh, they're going to be spread out more, so he's going to have more obvious running lanes. It never fully felt like a fit, and health played a part in that. But I don't know, man. The best of Braylon Allen with, whatever he's 6'2", 235, you're just like, man, when he has a head of steam, he's just as dangerous as anybody in this sport. And, sad it didn't work out for him, but when watching the best of Braylon Allen, I was a very happy fan.
What I think is interesting about Braylon Allen, this past season, he played in a Phil Longo system this past season.
Quarterbacks getting hurt, so it's, Tanner Mordecai goes down relatively early. The offense never looks the same. They don't have playmakers at receiver. It's just different.
It was totally different. He had something like 50 fewer carries this season as compared to 2022, but had more touchdowns, still was crazy productive as a guy who can get in the end zone. And Ty Hildenbrandt, not an NFL GM, not
could
necessarily, maybe I could be.
Not a sponsor, could be, not a GM, open to it.
Maybe not the best fantasy player either. However, somebody who can punch the ball in from the 1-yard line is always going to have a place on my team and a place in my heart.
Yeah.
So I agree with you. I remember when he came out. I just remember when we started hearing rumblings about Braylon Allen and him going to Wisconsin and fitting into that system. You're right. I mean, the timeline was a little bit off for him, and it maybe didn't work out as much as we hoped. But just a absolute bull of a kid. Just a bull. And
it's, to me, it's not even just the like punch it in from the 1-yard line. It's like, okay, we're up 5 with 3:57 left. We're starting the drive at our own 20. And we are just going to wear down this defense. And we are going to make them wish they were elsewhere. And I'm going to miss Audric Estime. I did a video about Audric Estime, and it's very much the same thing. Built big, 6 foot, 230. And yes, he's an absolute red zone and goal line threat. But we've all watched games in which, like, it's 3rd and 3. We know they're going to run some sort of counter or something to this giant dude, and there's very little this defensive line and this front 7 can do about it, worn down after 3.5 quarters. And so when you have Audric Estime, when you have Braylon Allen, when you have any of those guys, it affords you something where, like, yeah, your offensive line might only be okay and they're worn down, but this guy's going to fall forward for yet another first down. And that is just, it's backbreaking.
You know who you don't fall forward against?
Who's that?
Byron Murphy.
Yeah.
From Texas.
Texas?
Byron Murphy is listed at 6'1", 308.
Mm-hmm.
Byron Murphy is going to get drafted. Byron Murphy is a bowling ball with eyes.
Mm-hmm.
That is an incredible height-weight split there. And I think of Byron Murphy. I mean, there are obvious Tavondre Sweat.
He's a football acre, right?
Just incredible.
The acreage with him is robust.
I could sit here and list guys off of the Texas defense, but bear in mind that, again, context in this sense is important, because what was the knock on Texas for a good long while before Sark got there? They were trying to build this defense, but the defense it did not have the required level of toughness to be truly a difference-making unit.
Well, don't disrespect Puna Ford, but elsewhere, yes.
Remember, it was they don't tackle, they're not tough, they're giving up on plays, like they're missing assignments, things of that nature.
Right.
This is not to say that Byron Murphy was the linchpin in this whole operation, but Byron Murphy to me represents one of those guys who was down in the trenches doing the dirty work, helping turn the Texas defense into what it became, a playoff defense.
Yeah.
That to me is something that I will miss. A lot of these linemen, these interior linemen, don't get the love that they deserve. We hear about them when we talk about NFL draft prospects. We certainly hear about them when our teams have to try and run against them. But oftentimes it's the quarterbacks. Oftentimes it's the edge rushers, even the offensive linemen who get a lot of the love. But Byron Murphy for me is one of those guys, if only because of his incredible bowling ball-esque dimensions.
Yeah.
Is one of those guys that I'm excited to see what he does at the next level. And I'm going to miss him. Certainly Texas is going to miss him along their defensive front.
Yeah, and Texas in this moment, by the way, and we haven't really talked about like who's replacing these guys. Like Michigan's in good shape secondary-wise. It's I think this guy Burrows, or Mick Burrows, excuse me.
Yeah.
And Notre Dame seems to be good at running back. Was it Jeremiah Love?
Jeremiah Love, my guy.
But he's not. He's big like Estime.
He's not big like Estime. No one's big like Estime.
I don't know if Notre Dame has like a follow-up act. It's Ches Malusi with who's not built like Braylon Allen. USC, we'll see. It's Miller Moss. Miller Moss is not Caleb Williams. But Texas is now without both of these guys, Byron Murphy and Tavondre Sweat. They're kind of like fast and furious trying to find bodies. They just got, I think, an Arizona transfer or Georgia to Arizona transfer. They were looking at Jay Toya from USC, UCLA. And so it's easy to say like, oh, this guy was incredible, but like there aren't many this guys.
Well, that's the thing.
Why like
that's the thing, right?
Going back 2-3 years to like Jordan Davis at Georgia,
Georgia,
and he was bigger. He was like 360 or something like that. We're like, when you can find somebody that big and who can move and is effective, Texas is going to deeply miss Byron Murphy.
Yeah, you can measure the impact that a player had on the program by what happens when he leaves. Yeah. And these are not guys that just grow on trees. He's a big dude.
Sark, I think, was quoted this spring. It's like, we cannot have enough big defensive linemen.
No. And they've been a huge part of that ongoing project on defense to make Texas into a playoff caliber team. Yeah. So I'm going to miss Byron Murphy. I'm going to miss watching him play. And certainly Texas is as well. Can I rattle off a few of the defenders that I put on my list here?
Please. And Byron Murphy, by the way, nearly tackled Michael Penix in the semis of the playoffs. So
that's right. There you go.
Yeah.
I've got Jared Verse here.
Good call.
Jared Verse, I think, is just a super interesting story. Transferred down to Florida State. Was it Albany he came from?
Well, yeah. Up in level, down geographically, yes.
Correct.
Albany. Yeah, the Great Danes?
The Great Danes. Jared Verse came to Florida State hoping to become a little bit more prominent, hoping to become a top 10, top whatever caliber NFL pick. I think he has done that. He was an absolute force to be reckoned with for the Florida State Seminoles this past season and really his 2 seasons in Tallahassee. So I'm going to miss him out there. I'm going to miss talking about him. He just seems like he was always on a mission to become this star defensive lineman. And to see him kind of do that before our very eyes, as Florida State was also trending up, was a cool story. Much like Jordan Travis, right? He was part of that project. So that was cool to see. I will miss, on a personal level,
a lot of no love from you, by the way.
I know.
Yeah.
Marist Liufau from Notre Dame. Couldn't say his name, as I am wont to do with
big hair. Yes.
Big hair. As I want to do with any name that just deviates a bit from the norm. But after I learned it, and after I learned and certainly watched his deal, he is a downhill linebacker, 6'2", about 230-ish, give or take. Can play pretty much anywhere. Can play 4-3, can play 3-4. Wherever they put him, I think he's going to be successful at the next level. And there is something special about watching a downhill style linebacker. A guy that is just like a heat-seeking missile.
A thumper, yeah.
I love those guys. I love that.
How does he compare to like recent Notre Dame linebackers in terms of both his production and just your like Drew Tranquill, like all those guys that Notre Dame's had a nice run going back to Jalen Smith, Manti Te'o. Like, does he hold a similar place? I know he was there forever.
Yeah, I mean he's been there a while. I mean, I think he was sort of a late bloomer in that sense. I like to think he's got a little bit more pro upside than somebody like a Drew Tranquill. But Drew Tranquill won a Super Bowl ring with the Kansas City Chiefs.
He's made some money. Yeah,
he's made some money. He's been in the league for a while. But I think this guy's got a lot more athleticism in his game, and so at least to that end, I'm more excited about what the future could hold for him at the next level.
Any other defensive players?
Kool-Aid McKinstry.
Yeah.
Here is the duality of Kool-Aid McKinstry. The duality is this. Kool-Aid McKinstry's name is Kool-Aid. It's Kool-Aid.
It's a good starting point. Yeah.
It's a good starting point. It's a fun name. It's a playful name. I think for a lot of folks, you see somebody named Kool-Aid and maybe that's where you stop. Maybe where you turn off your critical thinking. But here is the real deal with this guy. The real deal with Kool-Aid McKinstry is that he is smart as freaking hell. He is a smart defender. That funny name masks the fact that you can stick him into almost any kind of system and he's going to figure it out. That was why Saban trusted him in the manner that he did. That was obviously how he got to Alabama in the first place. He is a dude who sees the field. He's not overwhelming from an athletic standpoint, but in his time at Alabama, he was the number that people called out. They wanted to know where Kool-Aid McKinstry was because he could figure out what an offense was doing. I miss guys like that. Even if they're not playing for my team, even if they are just guys that you and I talk about when we do our episodes week in and week out. But the guys who are just sort of field generals and they're smart and they see it, they have the vision.
Get everybody lined up. Yep.
They know what they're doing. It doesn't matter how many curveballs you throw at them, they figure it out. I'm always going to miss a guy named Kool-Aid. But on top of the fact that he's got the funny name, the fact that he's also got that level of football IQ is something to me that I don't know, you can't replace that very easily. And I also think of it from this standpoint, a lot of these players that are going to be leaving Bama the next couple of years going into the NFL, it's sort of like Saban's parting gift to football. You get to see at the next level what Saban saw in them on the college level.
Sure.
And so Kool-Aid for me, I think also falls into that category of just somebody who's really smart, knows the game, had a huge impact on Alabama's secondary, and will be missed. Will be missed by Kalen DeBoer now for sure.
I'll stick with that theme. Cooper DeJean.
Here it is. Here it is.
I don't know that he is the heady player that McKinstry is. I don't know either way. All I know is nonstop plays, whether it's as a punt returner, playing the nickel, playing corner, playing safeties, all over the place. Comes in, local hero. Actually, almost went to South Dakota State, I believe, to play quarterback. Was a great all-state basketball player in Iowa. Has a ridiculous vertical and scored. And I did a video about this. Scored, I think, more touchdowns in 2022, both in terms of pick sixes and I believe also if you include punt returns, but even just in pick sixes, than all of Iowa's receivers combined in 2022.
Yeah.
Which is just kind of a snarky thing to say about Iowa's offense. But people didn't know that Big Ten quarterbacks didn't know you don't throw in the direction of Cooper DeJean yet in 2022. They kind of learned that by 2023. He still made a ton of plays and was just ridiculous. And, it unfortunately gets hurt at the end of 2023 and has the weird moment against Minnesota where does he call a fair catch? Does he not?
Yeah.
He has this weird arm thing, and that becomes the lasting image of him, I think, in terms of what he did for Iowa in terms of one specific play that got a lot of notoriety. But just incredible. And I imagine he's going to be drafted in or around the first round, and he will be all over an NFL field wherever he ends up playing. He was just he was too good. He was too good. Even surprised they didn't try him on offense.
No.
At Iowa.
Well,
not fully surprised. It was the brain trust of the Ferentz family.
I was going to say, are you really that surprised?
I'm surprised they didn't get to such a desperate place that they didn't directly snap it to him often. But alas, he was incredible for Iowa. And those kinds of players don't come around often.
He was the top response to our social media post when we asked people
Sure.
Who are you going to miss? A lot of Cooper DeJeans out there.
Has to.
A lot of Cooper DeJeans. These
Can I go with something similar?
Two-way caliber athletes are always the guys that I think loom large when you have a discussion like this.
Yeah, it's another one of those, like, in college, it's not that coaches can be more creative. It's that there's just more room to be creative, and you don't have an NFL roster. So if you have an NFL player and he's also willing to take snaps in the backfield, like Sione Vaki of Utah, my
here we
next
go.
player,
Another guy.
Transition. You just don't get that in the NFL in the same way. And so we can appreciate the college game for it. And Utah is just decimated by injuries in 2023. They're desperate for yardage. They're going between Nate Johnson and Bryson Barnes at quarterback. Their running backs are beat up all over the place. Micah Bernard, all these guys. Jaquindon Jackson, who's now at Arkansas. Like, it's just walking wounded. And so they're like, well, we got this guy who's pretty incredible as an athlete. And they start giving Sione Vaki snaps in the backfield, both direct snaps. He's at running back. He's catching balls out of the backfield. I think during the season, the middle of the year, whether it's USC, Cal, or there was a stretch where he was like, I'm sorry, did he just have 318 all-purpose yards? Yes? Okay. And he's the starting safety. Okay,
Yeah,
got it.
right.
He was a really good safety. He'll continue to play safety in the NFL exclusively. But I love both the creativity on the level of the coaching staff and just his willingness and his enthusiasm to just destroy people on offense as well. It's great.
Sione Vaki, a great name.
Sione Vaki.
Great name. We do miss names. I do think that plays into it. If only a little bit. Kool-Aid, McKinstry, Maris, Leofau. I'm a sucker for a good name.
Definitely.
That's why I include Anais Smith on my list as well.
Yep.
Anais Smith.
Weapon.
It's just a weapon. You know, speaking of guys who are smart, who know how to find space. Anais Smith, an incredibly productive receiver for Texas A&M, of course, dealt with injuries, but one of these guys who I think at the next level projects as an obvious slot receiver. NFL defenses, are playing a lot of zone. Anais Smith knows how to find open space and zone, and I think he's going to be super productive at the next level. Another one of those guys that I'm just almost irrationally going to include as part of every fantasy roster that I own, because I know what he did at Texas A&M. I think he can be crazy productive in the NFL, provided he can stay healthy.
Yeah, I think you're right. And it's one of those, he is one of those players, and we talked about this with Nate Tice, like if he ends up at the right spot.
Yeah, he's great. He's golden.
He'll be a highlight reel.
Absolutely.
Hope it happens for him. And especially he's one of those players like, went to the wrong school at the wrong time in terms of like running in a Jimbo offense or playing receiver, also lining up at running back in a Jimbo Fisher offense. Not ideal. Okay.
The last guy on my list.
Yeah.
And then you can close us out.
Please.
I've got Ricky Pearsall on my list as well.
I like that. ASU to Florida.
I'm a sucker for circus catches.
Yeah.
I'm a sucker for circus catches. Never mind how the guy projects. I mean, I think he projects well at the next level, but crazy athletic, was kind of the go-to guy in a Florida passing offense that left a lot to be desired. But Ricky Pearsall, you had to know where Ricky Pearsall was. You just had to know where he was at all times, because he's going to go up, he's going to make the catch, he's going to find space, he's athletic, he can get behind defenses. These guys who are sort of like Swiss Army knives when it comes to the passing game, you can move them around, you can put them in any system, make them run any route, and they're going to find a way to get open and catch the football. Those guys to me are irreplaceable, and they are tough to find on your roster. Look at Notre Dame's wide receiving core this past season. Look at Penn State's wide receiving core this past season. Two position groups that I know extremely well, both of which probably had a better quarterback, or could have, in some ways, had a better quarterback than what Florida had with Graham Mertz. And Ricky Pearsall was the one getting open. It wasn't any of those other guys for any of those other teams getting open. They couldn't do it, but Ricky Pearsall could.
Yeah. No, he stood out in a not all that productive offense, but he was the weapon, and it was pretty obvious. Can I move to close out with some offense?
Please.
Okay. Jayden Daniels. Daniels just won the Heisman Trophy. This is not me. We're selecting, obviously.
Way to select the
players.
sleeper, Dan.
Didn't didn't claim I would select a sleeper. Jayden Daniels is like, his story is weird though. Like that's what sort of gets lost, where he's just like, well, of course he succeeded. Look at these receivers. Like, he needed to score a ton of points because the defense was so bad. And like, he's got 2 first-round receivers and Malik Neighbors and Brian Thomas is the second one.
Yeah.
Like, of course, this was not a foregone conclusion at all. Even like when he transferred to LSU, I think I'll just raise my hand and be like, why does LSU want Jayden Daniels? Like, he threw too many interceptions at ASU at times. Like, he had an up and down time at ASU, and I remember specifically, it didn't seem like he was terribly loved in the locker room. Wasn't there that like social media video, like an Instagram video of ASU players laughing and like offering to pack his locker for him?
Yeah, I remember that.
And I just remember thinking to myself, again, raising my hand as a dumb person, like, where's Jayden Daniels going to go? And goes to LSU and battles for the job. This was not like, oh, you are the new starting. Has to win the job because it's Brian Kelly bringing him in, and it's first year Brian Kelly. Jayden Daniels beats Alabama in his first year. They win the SEC West in his first year, shows an incredible amount of poise, is beat up at times, and is even beat up in the SEC championship game against Georgia, and Garrett Nussmeier comes in and throws a bunch. And we even did a show with, the LSU guy.
Jordy,
yes. Where like, I felt it was reasonable to say like, this is Jayden Daniels' job, but is there a slight chance it isn't with how Garrett Nussmeier looked in the bowl game?
Yeah.
And he was pretty sure it was Jayden Daniels' job, and Jayden Daniels wins the Heisman. So I love that you even go back to Jayden Daniels as a recruit. He's a highly regarded recruit from Southern California, but nobody on the West Coast sort of finds a spot for him. And I think he really wanted to go to UCLA. This is something I had heard, and fact check me if I'm wrong. UCLA's quarterback coach at the time, I believe Dana Bible, Chip Kelly's quarterback coach in 2019. So this is the middle of DTR, says, I don't see it. I don't see it with Jayden Daniels. Ends up going to ASU, Herm Edwards, and it's a really fascinating ASU team there in the early 2020s because it's like Johnny Wilson and Ricky Pearsall, like all these guys, Chip Trainum.
There was a lot of
all
talent
these guys
on
that went
team.
on to succeed.
There was
What'd
talent on that team.
Yeah. Both sides of the ball. Goes to LSU, looks very good and promising in year one, and then obviously is a world beater, Heisman Trophy, will probably be selected in the top 5. Like, it's just been kind of a crazy whirlwind of a 5-year stretch for Jayden Daniels.
Do you remember my line on that quarterback derby when Brian Kelly first got to LSU?
Yeah, that he was just going to keep juggling.
Yeah, I was convinced that BK did not have it in him to deal with a wealth of quarterback options.
So it was Walker Howard, Garrett Nussmeier. It was, what was the name of the guy who retired, who showed a little bit of promise at LSU, and Jayden Daniels.
Right.
Oh, my God, I'm blanking on his name.
Yeah.
What's his name?
I'm blanking on it as well.
Miles Brennan. There
Miles
it is.
Brennan, thank you.
Yeah, so he has all these guys.
He has like 4 guys that he's got to choose from, and I just had no confidence that Brian Kelly was going to be able to pull that one off.
Right.
And it wasn't long into the season. I think I tried to speak that situation into existence, if only for my own amusement. And then it wasn't long before it was pretty apparent to anyone who was paying attention that it's going to be Jayden Daniels' job to lose. Yeah. And obviously he's gotten a lot better. He's got a great story. I'm excited to see what he does in the pros as well. He figures to be one of the first 3 draft picks. If he falls below that, I think it'd be a huge upset on draft night. So somebody who's obviously very highly regarded by the next level. And look, won the Heisman Trophy. Trophy, was crazy productive in that offense.
Had started his career as a freshman, completely ruining Oregon's playoff chances.
That's right.
In 2019.
That's right.
Like deep to like Brandon Ayuk. Like he was just launching as a freshman, takes down, Oregon comes back and almost pulls it out. And they started out terribly. There's all these like rumors that somebody got a hold of Oregon's playbook at ASU, or there was like weird like dealings. I have no idea if any of that is true. But that has nothing to do with the fact that Jayden Daniels completely bombed it over a good Oregon defense. Oregon ends up winning the Rose Bowl, but was incredible right away for ASU.
Yeah.
In that game especially. Yeah.
Great. Who else you got?
I'll stay with Texas. You had Byron Murphy. Xavier Worthy. Okay?
Oh, man.
He's from Fresno. Love players from Fresno. I feel like the hit rate for Fresno players, no matter where they go to college, is like 114%. Okay?
Agreed.
So he's crazy fast. I remember like West Coast schools looking at him, but for whatever reason didn't take him. He goes to Michigan, and he is assured by Michigan that all of his academics are in order. And then suddenly, like 2 weeks before signing day, they're like, "Oh, I don't think it's in order." And he feels completely betrayed by Michigan. Ends up transferring to Texas, where he's immediately excellent for a still growing Texas team.
Yeah.
Gets behind a ton of defenses. I think set a record in the combine for 40 time. He runs like a 4.22.
Oh man, he
will
is
be
super quick.
Not impossible to replace, but he's going to be very tough. I mean, Texas is just recruited well enough, and there's like Jonte Cook and Ryan Wingo and stuff there. But he was so consistently excellent when on the field, did deal with some injury issues, that he was such a spark for Texas being quote unquote back, in that he was like the clear go-to receiver downfield almost immediately, and yet still there was very little that teams could do to stop it. I always appreciate that.
Yeah. Xavier Worthy. We had a minute on our show where we were all in on Xavier Worthy.
Mm-hmm.
Xavier Worthy this, Xavier Worthy that. And curious to see what situation he finds himself in.
God, imagine him at Michigan too. That's exactly what they needed.
It really was.
And yet they still won the national
Still won the
championship
national
without him. Yeah.
Who else do you got?
My last one's Bo Nix, okay? And I apologize for nothing. And this is why. If I can. Because this is half my show. So I get to choose what
Please.
I talk about. Okay, Bo Nix starts out his career at Auburn as a legacy, as a 5-star. The whole world, the whole Auburn universe expects the world of him. He comes in, it's a true freshman, starts game 1, immediately beats Oregon on a neutral field.
Right.
Okay? Immediately beats Oregon on a game-winning throw. Finishes the season beating Alabama in the Iron Bowl. Never mind that it was backup quarterback Mac Jones throwing 2 pick sixes was probably the biggest reason that game went the way it did. That's how his season was bookended. In between, I thought he was okay. I didn't even think he was that good against Oregon. I think he threw 2 picks against Oregon, but the game worked out. Mario Cristobal probably mismanaged that game, and Auburn does what a good team does and takes advantage and wins a close game. He constantly has different coordinators at Auburn. He will show like flashes of greatness or make an incredible play, and then he'll like dirt 3 screens in a row. Like, he's just never comfortable at Auburn. He never gets in a rhythm. He finally gets not a real offensive coordinator. He gets Mike Bobo, and he's showing flashes. And then Brian Harson's tenure is a disaster, and he opts to transfer. He like breaks his ankle at the end of his final season at Auburn, or does something terrible to his ankle. Goes to Oregon. I'm bummed. I'm full on bummed that this is the guy to take over at Oregon. And he leaves Oregon. I'm totally bummed. This happens like mid-December, I want to say.
Yeah.
So this is Mario Cristobal leaves. I'm bummed. Dan Lanning arrives. I'm pretty excited. Dan Lanning brings in Bo Nix. I'm like, oh, I'm bummed again.
I didn't get it. I didn't get it. And I remember
didn't get it at all.
We did a show here, and I seem to remember being openly very skeptical that this was going to be a thing. Like, this is the guy that you want? Are you sure? Like, is it?
Yeah.
What am I missing here?
Right.
Yeah.
And Oregon had a quarterback of the future in Ty Thompson.
Correct.
Who Oregon people wanted to put in the season before instead of Anthony Brown and Tyler Shuck the year before. Like, there was just like this weird unease at quarterback at Oregon for the first time. And Bo Nix is this wildly inconsistent quarterback who's never had a standout season that lives up to his hype. Arrives at Oregon, immediately gets drilled by Georgia. Immediately. Throws 2 bad picks. They lose. Remind me of the finals, 49-3?
Yeah.
They don't score a touchdown in his first game.
Got crushed.
And after that moment is basically nothing but excellent. And I don't know how you tell the Bo Nix story with also saying Michael Penix was an incredible story, of course. But I'm not gonna give that honor to Michael Penix on my show.
Sure.
After breaking my heart 3 times in the past 2 years. So Bo Nix is basically the most efficient, incredible quarterback that he never was at Auburn. After he gets to Oregon, receivers develop, offensive coordinators develop. Kenny Dillingham leaves after year 1 to ASU. Will Stein is great for Oregon. Their offense is a record-setting offense for Oregon this past year. And I could not be more full on my own words. I could not be eating them more, Ty. That Bo Nix leaves Oregon an absolute Oregon legend. And I could not, going back to 2019, 18, or whatever, I could not imagine finishing the Bo Nix story with those words. And so he was everything a college football quarterback should be by the time he left Eugene. And I'm not going to take it for granted. And I hope it works out with Dylan Gabriel and beyond. But, man, was he excellent.
Well, it goes to show that situations are meaningful, especially in football. And going to the right landing spot can have a profound impact. I did not see this in Bo Nix's game. I mean, I think we saw plenty of flashes in his time at Auburn that he had playmaking capabilities. We knew that was part of his game, but consistency was the thing that I think we had trouble fully grasping and seeing what he could do.
He would play Texas A&M. I remember there was a specific game at Texas A&M against a very good Aggie defense. He ended the game averaging like 3.5 yards per attempt. And it just seemed wherever he looked was the wrong place to look.
Yeah.
Right? That he was like, oh, not there again. And so that he finished his time at Oregon, beating the teams that Oregon beat in the manner in which they did and playing with his sort of adopted brother, Tez Johnson. That's a whole good story too. Like, it was just very cool to see somebody come full circle and get that sort of storybook ending. Plays in what ultimately is like a meaningless Fiesta Bowl, but wants to play one last time for Oregon. It's very cool. That's all.
Yeah, I think the fact that he developed in the manner that he did, I mean, obviously is going to be borderline first-round NFL talent at this point. I don't know if I want him on my team. I still do question that consistency at the next level, but obviously the Oregon coaching staff found a way to get the best out of him on the college level and to be a very, very, very productive, as you said, record-setting Oregon quarterback.
Mm-hmm.
I'll miss him too.
Yeah.
It won't feel the same without Bo Nix. Yeah, I agree.
I mean, he was in college football long enough. I think he set the record for most starts as a college football player. So
a cagey veteran, as it were.
Yeah.
All right. That does it for our list of guys we will miss in 2024. Send in your names as well. All across social media, solidverbal@gmail.com. Anywhere you can find Dan and I. Let us know. Let us know what names we left off the list. I'm looking at some of the names that came in now after we put out that call on Twitter, and you got some Marvin Harrison Jr.'s in here. And not for the reasons that you'd expect, but Marvin Harrison Jr. because maybe we won't get to hear Gus Johnson call out Maserati Marv.
Maserati. Yeah.
Michael Penix getting some love here.
Yeah.
As well. Michael Penix. Zach Frazier. How about Zach Frazier, the center for West Virginia? Ryan says an incredible center who led by example on the line. Still have some good talent in there, but he's truly one of a kind at that position. Some Joe Alt references in here as well. Joe Alt, by the way, a great offensive lineman name.
Just a mountain too, right?
An absolute mountain, but Joe Alt, like if you knew coming out of the womb that your offspring were going to be
Joe Alt.
If you knew that guy was going to eventually grow up to be an offensive lineman, you'd name him Joe Alt. Perfect name for that.
Or
type
like
of thing.
the Secretary of the Interior, maybe?
Joe Alt could be the Secretary of the Interior as well. Yeah.
Yeah.
A lot of great names that came in here.
Nice picturesque moment at Yellowstone with Secretary Joe Alt. Yeah.
Solidverbal@gmail.com. Again, for ballers.com is where you can go to find our Patreon, Dan. We'll be back next week, of course, talking through all sorts of things going on in and around the world of college football. We have yet to really scratch the surface on what's going on out at Colorado. Perhaps we can do that next week. There are some other news things that we need to get into, what with the transfer portal. Of course, there are some other items that we have yet to discuss where we'll do our best to try and get through as much of what's going on from a news standpoint in college football. But being so, the draft is, as many folks are listening to this tonight, needed to take a stroll down memory lane.
You see Deion Sanders say that he might not be on the sideline for all of the games this year, that he does most of his work behind the scenes. No, I just made that up. But
it seems believable.
For a second.
Currently 0 recruits 0 recruits in the class of 2025.
That's okay. He'll figure out like, oh, this NC State backup left tackle is going to be the thing that drives Colorado forward.
Got
Great.
Dayan Hayes, though. So we'll
That's
talk
good.
about Colorado maybe next week. Thank you to everybody out there for downloading, for listening, for supporting what Dan and I do. Once again, make sure you hit follow or subscribe wherever it is you are listening to this show. We appreciate it. Last time, verballers.com. That's our Patreon. For that guy over there, my good friend Dan Rubenstein, for myself, Ty Hildebrandt, thanks again for listening and supporting. We'll talk to you all soon. Stay solid.
Peace.